Okay.
All right, on my screen we are live. Is it showing up on YouTube is the ultimate question.
It appears to be.
Okay, good. Yes, people do not change the channel. Things look very different because I'm still not able to... I can get into the Windows side, but I can't really do anything because the AMD drivers aren't working, and I'm going back and forth with AMD support. So I'm on the Linux side, but I didn't have everything set up here, so yeah, we'll have to do without the webcam and do with this more ramshackle setup here. So
nobody in chat yet.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anyone. If you're in chat, say something. Let me know you're there. Make sure everyone's getting this.
Yeah.
Looks like we're going out fine. No drop frames or anything.
Oh, did you hear that on my end?
Hear what?
Kitsune, you know, he's been trying to get me into D&D, and he's having a D&D night tonight. I told him I couldn't attend. Yeah. I think it's for the better, too, because if I joined him, like, the first hour or so would just be me saying, okay, so I can move now? Okay, so now what do I do?
No, okay, so there's Fishron. Yeah, okay, so I guess we're going, yeah.
I mean, going back to what I said before we started, that's the biggest problem with Dungeons & Dragons versus Make-Believe Pretend. It's like, when you have to rely on a dice for everything, it's like, what's the point?
Well, if you've got a good DM, then then you wouldn't have to worry about it, because he'll make sure you're just there to have fun, and he'll take care of the heavy lifting. Hello, Bradley. Yes, I know we're doing this kind of at the last minute because I had all sorts of things going on. My dog needed dental surgery, and then my daughter graduated on Friday, and then just trying to work this in. I'm like, I got 2 days left in the month. I gotta do this. You know, plus all of the troubleshooting on my Windows side.
So your daughter graduated. What if she tells you that she wants to attend UCLA and to get a liberal arts degree? What are you going to tell her?
I mean, she can do what she wants, but she is of a mind of she is not going to California. She wants to take a gap year and then do 2 years of community college and see. That's probably the smartest thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah, you would ask her, it's like, honey, why do you want to go to UCLA and all that? Yeah. Actually,
cool, Bradley. Congrats to you too. Although, I will say this, no disrespect to Bradley or my daughter, but it's just amazing how graduating from high school is something nowadays that's typical and accepted, and it's like there's a BA from college, okay. But graduating from high school is like something that's accepted, and there's like almost like there's something wrong with you if you don't. And yet they all go on like it's some amazing achievement. And it's like, okay, an amazing achievement that almost everyone in the country has achieved.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've heard one of the reasons why a long time ago, why dropping out of college was why dropping out of high school was relatively acceptable was simply because a lot of people did that, you know, after, you know, I mean, in your grandma's time, it wasn't unheard of for people, you know, once they graduated from middle school, they would just not even bother going to high school. They say, okay, I want to get an apprenticeship and I want to start getting to work and making money.
Okay, Fishron says I'm only coming through the left speaker. Is that the case with you, Bradley, or anyone else? Because if so, I need to fix that. I'm not sure.
By the way, Bradley and I were in a voice chat one time, and we were talking about the Bahamas and college, and how some colleges have like a 4-year master's degree in basket weaving. To which I said, "Why do you need to go to college for that? If you want to pursue a career in basket weaving, I'm pretty sure if you go to a big city, you can find, you know, a street salesman that makes baskets, and you can ask her to take you under her wing."
My settings in OBS are for my mic to be right down the middle, so I don't know. Unless I hear from someone else, I'm going to assume it's on Fishron's side. It's fine on my end, but I'm not wearing headphones. That shouldn't make a difference. Fishron, make sure your headset is like plugged all the way in, because sometimes if it's not all the way in, it won't make contact with one of the speakers.
Oh yeah, that.
All right. Well, Chris, why don't we get into your story? A story I think you've been itching to tell for several months now.
Yeah, I was gonna wait a little longer, but since I'm gonna be taking the plea deal on Tuesday anyway, it doesn't matter anymore because it's not gonna go to trial. But officially, within a couple of days, I am officially going to lose my Second Amendment rights for the rest of my life unless something happens in my state or I move out.
So why don't you start at the beginning and tell us what happened?
Okay, so on September, I can't remember.
Change names and all that good stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on December, September of 2020, my mom's ex-boyfriend, who I'll call Rufus, that's just the first name that came to my head. Basically, I do not know what the hell happened, but I was cleaning out my car and I left the trash bags that I filled up in front of the garage. Now they were out of the way mostly, but I forgot about them because it was hot that day and I went inside to cool off and I forgot about them. Well, apparently he found them. He got furious and he stomps in and he's screaming, demanding to know where I am. And when I realized it's about the garbage bags, I didn't want to do anything about it because, like I said, he's up there stomping around, screaming and all that. So I lock myself in my room and hope he calms down. But minutes go by, he's not calming down. Then I hear him start throwing stuff around. He starts punching the walls, destroying our house. Then he's threatening me. He's threatening my mom, my dad. And finally, I can't get him calmed down. I'm scared for my life out there. I'm having a full-blown panic attack. So I finally had enough, and I grabbed my shotgun because I thought the shotgun would scare him off. I ordered him to leave. He threw a portable fan at me, and in the chaos, fearing that he was coming down to attack me, I fired a warning shot into the ceiling. He took off, and I was furious, and I ordered him to leave and never come back. And he said that and basically earlier he had threatened to say that if you call the cops on me, I'm gonna sure we're both gonna go to prison. So fearing he was gonna call the cops and say that I was a crazy maniac going on a shooting rampage, I called them to report him. So finally they arrive, I cooperate, I give them all the details, and the police act all sympathetic. Guess what happens shortly afterwards? They tell me I have to go to jail and I have to spend the day in jail. And while in jail, they hand me a letter saying I'm the one being charged with domestic violence.
So you save your mom and your family from someone trying to commit domestic violence, and yet you're the one committing domestic violence.
Well, and the argument they're making is that, well, he wasn't actually physically abusive and all that. It's like he was still emotionally abusive, and just because he never hit anyone before doesn't mean he wasn't going to start doing it. I mean, I know he's hit my dog before. I know he's hit our cats before. So,
well, and you also said he was punching the wall and throwing things.
Yeah.
And you also did everything you could to escape the situation. I don't know if Wisconsin is a castle doctrine state or not.
It's not a castle doctrine.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's not castle doctrine.
But I mean, even without that, by running to your room and locking the door, you tried to escape the situation and let it simmer down.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. And and I've been battling this for close to a year now. I got a lawyer and all that. Well, for a while, it took me forever. To we had to scrap together to get a lawyer because the public defense office wasn't taking my case because they kept delaying it. I kept calling them every couple weeks, and then but they never heard back from me. So finally we got a lawyer, and we tried over and over again, and the DA just kept ignoring me and kept ignoring our case. And finally, my lawyer makes contact with him. He says he's ready to plea, but the thing is, the DA is adamant, saying I do not want your client to own guns anymore. So, in my honest opinion, I don't want to sound like Alex Jones or anything. I think I was targeted because I was a gun owner. Oh, and by the way, they, as part of the procedure, they took all my other weapons away, and as far as my knowledge, they never got a warrant for it. And I looked up the rule. Yes, they could take the shotgun I used to commit the crime, but the other weapons they could not take unless they had a warrant to take them, which they didn't do. I tried bringing it up with my lawyer, but he sadly told me that's a civil asset case, and right now I can't do that because you're hiring me to be a criminal attorney. So when this is over, you're going to have to sue the Green Bay Police Department, which I'm not going to be able to afford. So
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, because we don't have loser pays in this country. So
yeah,
even if you win, you still lose, and
yeah.
Probably better off just, well, I was going to say save up for some more guns, but you can't do that if, well, no, I don't know. You were pleading no contest, right?
Yeah.
So
but the problem is that Wisconsin has one of those ex post facto rules in place that says if you're convicted of domestic violence, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor, you can't have guns.
But it's not a guilty plea. You're pleading nolo contendere.
Doesn't matter because they are going to find me guilty regardless. That's what he told me.
Even if you plead no contest.
Yep.
Well, that's messed up.
Yeah, I know. And I brought that up. I told my lawyer, like, do you know how unconstitutional that is? And basically, I can't say exactly what he said, but he basically said, basically to paraphrase what he said, he's basically saying, yeah, I understand it's technically unconstitutional, but you know what? The state doesn't care. State and local governments, they do not care. All they care about is what X court said from some obscure trial years ago that nobody's heard of.
It's also not lost on me that this is the same state that's prosecuting Kyle Rittenhouse.
And that one girl who killed a guy that had kidnapped her and was planning to sell her into sex slavery.
Oh yeah, I forget her name, but yeah, another one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we covered both of those on the podcast.
Yeah, yeah, basically that's my plan. My plan is I'm just going to have to take it, go on the probation, but once I save enough money, I'm either going to move to a county within my state that's a self-declared Second Amendment sanctuary, and if that doesn't work, I'm leaving.
I think the only real issue might be how is it going to show up on a federal background check, because that's going to be nationwide.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I'm leaving. Like I said, if that doesn't work, then I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna leave to Texas or Wyoming, whatever, because those states are flat out saying they're not going to enforce any laws, even the federal ones.
Yeah, it looks like Texas is about to pass constitutional carry.
Yeah.
Yeah, stand your ground, fish run. I had asked him about that earlier. That's called the Castle Doctrine.
Wisconsin.
It's the same thing in this case because Chris was in his home. Stand your ground is also applying that to, like, if you're out in public or somewhere else and someone's attacking you, you don't have the obligation to try and retreat. You can actually stay there. But I mean, if you're in your home, they end up being the same thing.
Yeah. And one thing I'm going to do in the meantime while I'm on probation, and I did ask my lawyer for this, and he said, oh yeah, you perfectly can do it, is that when I have the free time, when I'm not working, I'm going to be showing up, whenever I can as possible in front of the DA's office, and I'm going to be holding up signs and passing out flyers explaining my scenario, because I asked him, can I legally do it? He says, yep, it's protected by First Amendment, and if they try to get you with that, that's really not going to help them.
Yep.
Yeah. And here's the thing, before any statists out there say, well, you're taking the plea agreement, here's what happened if I won't take the plea agreement. And my lawyer flat looked over it and he said, the sad truth is that I don't think you're going to win if you take it to trial because there's just too many odds against you, because the county I live in is very anti-gun. And right now, Wisconsin is being governed by a Joe Biden wannabe. So he's going to be no help to me. So, if I were to fight this in court and get convicted, here's what's going to happen to me. I'm going to spend 16 months in jail. And I think Wisconsin jails are 23-1, meaning you're in your cell for 23 hours, only out for 1 hour, which is psychological torture, I might add. I'd have to pay $11,000 in fines, and not only would I lose my Second Amendment right, I would lose my voting rights permanently because it would be considered a felony, and not to mention I could be put on felony probation, which is even worse than misdemeanor probation.
Yeah.
Like, if I recall correctly, if you're on felony probation, you can't even leave the states you've been convicted in.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, this is something that Chris and I have been talking about, in private. I've let him, vent in my direction and just tried to give him what advice, I could. I couldn't give him legal advice. That's what his lawyer's for. But I think the ultimate advice I gave you, Chris, was just consider what future Chris is going to think. If, 5, 10, 20 years from now, future Chris looking back at that, if you take the deal, is he going to think, wow, I'm glad I took that deal, or gee, I wish I'd fought, or the other way around, if you'd fought, was that a fight worth having, or would future Chris just be going, gee, that wasn't worth it? So that, I think, is good general life advice. Think of what the future you years from now is going to think.
No, Bradley, to my knowledge, Governor Evers does not enjoy sniffing children, but like I said, he does support a lot of what Biden does, so he's going to be of no help. Yeah.
It's allowed, Fishron, because the politicians and the news media have been able to manipulate everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked it up.
People are misinformed as to what the Constitution is. They're misinformed as to what the effects of gun laws are. They're dished and doled out propaganda like a Law and Order. Yeah. And I know a lot of defense attorneys will tell you that it's not that they hate Law and Order, the TV show. They just hate that they get so many jury members coming in there thinking, oh, well, if the defense attorney did this, that must mean he's covering for a guilty person, and they're going to convict.
Yeah, I mean, because, now we've talked about him before. Legal Eagle, he gets a lot of stuff wrong, but one thing he's brought up that I really wish, people would take more seriously, because it is a legitimate defense, is the concept of hearsay, because we see so often in TV shows, it's like we find that one person that said, well, I overheard the defendant saying that he wanted to kill his wife. Oh, well, that means he killed his wife, when it's basically just saying, for all we know, he could have just been having a couple of drinks with some buddies, and they were like, oh, my wife's terrible. Oh, she's so naggy. Sometimes I want to throw her out the window sometimes. You know what I'm saying? That's the point of hearsay.
Yeah, there are a number of exceptions to hearsay. Things like, statement against interest. If someone says it basically on their deathbed, knowing that they're dying, then it's called the dying declaration, things like that. But the basic thing about hearsay is, oh, I heard so-and-so say such and such. It's one thing if they're just testifying that the person said it, that's one thing, but they cannot attest to, it can't be put forth as evidence of the truth behind the statement, because you can't cross it. If so-and-so said such and such, and you're going to put that forth as the truth, then you need to put that person on the stand and ask them so that the other side can have a chance to cross them on it.
Yeah. And like I said, the reason why I'm not going to fight it is because, sadly, I have thought about it, and the truth is the odds are stacked against me, and it's going to be a harder fight for me if I'm convicted of a felon than if I take the plea but fight it, later, through my other rights. Because my personal concern right now, though, is that I can't own guns, and anyone who's paying attention to what's been going on there knows that America is not in a good position right now, and I don't want to sound paranoid or anything, but what's going to happen if a riot breaks out in my town and I can't defend myself?
Yeah.
Of course it wouldn't have mattered, because we've seen plenty of times of people pulling their guns on rioters saying, take your riots somewhere else, but leave my place alone. The rioters call the cops, and the cops are like, oh yeah, you can't point your guns at them. We have to take you to jail.
But move somewhere where there's a high concentration of gun owners, especially concealed carry owners, because it's sort of like a vaccine and herd immunity. If enough people in your area have firearms, then it kind of
Oh
protects
yeah,
you.
it's gonna be. Oh yeah, it's gonna be like. Yeah, it's gonna be like. Yeah, yeah. If we were living in Texas, I'm pretty sure this never would have gone. Would have gone the case because the police would be like, but Mr. DA, why aren't you gonna charge it? It's like this is Texas. Almost everyone has a gun in Texas. Texas, every single juror I'm going to get up there is probably going to be a gun owner or is friends with someone who's a gun owner. And what are they going to say? They're going to say, well, he had every right to protect his mother and his house. But sadly, I don't. I live in the Midwest.
That's why I think it's going to be interesting in November when the Rittenhouse case comes forward, just to see what they say, because you could not ask for a more textbook example of self-defense, and you could not ask for a more textbook example of someone who defended himself with a firearm, who kept his head, who only shot when necessary. Of course, that's not what the news media is telling you about it, but it'll be really interesting trying to see how they prosecute that and how the media covers it. And
Yeah, but how it's going to be. And not to mention, I'm sorry, but I've seen plenty of videos of the DA, of the prosecutor who's prosecuting Kyle Rittenhouse, and I can smell corruption all over him because like he is doing everything he can to make sure that Kyle does not have a chance to defend himself properly.
oh yeah, and Bradley, you're thinking of Kennesaw, and I don't know if it's still the case or not, but I gotta say I'm as against that as much as I am against gun control laws. It should be the individual's choice whether or not to own a firearm.
Yeah, but yeah, I am just so pissed off, and like I said, even though I don't like the BLM people and all that, I do understand the anti-police mentality because it's like wow, I heard one person say the biggest problem with police these days is that they're no longer following what they were originally set up to be in America. Their job was to protect the rights and the property and the safety of the public, but now it's no longer that. Now it's basically your job as a policeman is to enforce the laws of the county or city, regardless if they should be laws at all.
Well, and originally it wasn't even you didn't have professional career police officers. The way those didn't exist at all, except I think the London police in like the 1840s is when that started. But yeah, I think before then it was pretty much you had the militia, people had guns, and if there was a problem, then you could get a few of your armed friends together and confront the guy and maybe even make a citizen's arrest. I don't even know if a citizen's arrest is even legal in most states now.
Nope. If you were to make a citizen's arrest, you'd be arrested and charged for kidnapping.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the cops can do it all.
I think even detention is iffy. You hold a gun on someone and call the cops, and you just hold them there until they get there. I think that's even become iffy.
Yeah. It reminds me of this really stupid thing I saw. It was a cop and an ex-con reacting to a video game called Payday 2, where you play as a Robin Hood style bank robber gang and all that. And there was a mission they were reacting to of the armored car, and the cop was like, "I don't get why these armored car people are fighting back, trying to protect the money. It's like, look, the money's insured. Why even bother? Why are you giving up your life for a person, for property?" To which I want to say, well, if you take a look at what's been going on in California with the cyber attacks, there's a reason why. Because if the criminal gets away, they're not going to say, "Okay, I had my fun. I'm never going to do it again." No, they're going to go, "Hey, I robbed that place. I got all this money. They didn't even fight back or raise an alarm. I'm going to do it again."
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, that's the reason why, why there's all these cyber attacks going on, is because for all the time people have just been telling the big tech guys, "Oh, just pay it. Your insurance will cover it. It's much better to keep everything going." Well, now over time, these cyber criminals have gotten so much money. Like as you showed, they're actually becoming companies in their own right. They're hiring people and they're going after and launching these targeted attacks.
Okay, so Rachel was having the same problem as Fishron. I've switched my mic over to mono, and if that doesn't fix it, I don't know what does. But
Be right back. I gotta get a glass of water. All this ranting's hurting my throat.
yeah, stay hydrated.
Yeah.
But
And Rachel, I'm sorry, but it's difficult to not be pissed at the situation I'm in, basically.
Yeah. Oh, perfectly understandable. Yeah. All right, now it's fine. Okay, good. Yeah, just hitting it on the mono, I guess, is what did it. It's odd that it was doing it for some people, but not others. But like I said, this for those of you who are just joining, as you can see, the visuals are quite different. This is well, not really a new setup because I'm not planning on continuing it. It's just what I had to do to get this going. It was either this or try to do it on my laptop. But yeah, Windows isn't working very well. I'm going back and forth with AMD support on that. I mean, Windows is working. I can boot up and get into it, but without the video card drivers working, it's just the Microsoft default drivers, so nothing works well. Brandley says, is it constitutional to overthrow the government? Well, it's definitely it's definitely consistent with the Declaration of Independence, because that absolutely says it's the right of people to alter or abolish the government. But, as far as the Constitution is concerned, I mean, I doubt you'd get that past any court. But then on the other hand, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they weren't exactly asking for permission, were they? They weren't exactly saying, gee, I wonder if it's legal for us to do this.
Yeah, I mean, the Babylon Bee made a funny article about that says that refusing to obey a rule that violates your right, where it was like this one it was a Babylon Bee article, but it said this one Democrat said disobeying an unconstitutional law, that's just un-American. It's like, yeah, and we were founded because the British people weren't giving us the rights as British citizens, and we told them, well, if you're not going to treat us like British citizens, then we don't want to be British citizens anymore.
Well, and that's the thing when you read a lot of the stuff, like I'm descended from one of the signers of the Tryon Resolves in August of 1775, I believe that was, where they called for taking up arms against anyone who's trying to enforce the rules of the king or the royal governor. But I mean, when you read that, it really comes across that these people are, proud, loyal English subjects, and they're like, look, just let us be, proper English subjects with all their, but as long as you're doing this, then we're going to have a problem.
Well, yeah,
so it wasn't like, oh, we hate Britain and we're radicals and we're going to overthrow the government,
Well, yeah, fun fact, the reason why King George III was so hated, during the Revolutionary War was because from our point of view, he betrayed us because, we tried petitioning Parliament multiple times, but they kept saying, yeah, whatever, American colonies, just keep paying your taxes. So finally, we gave an appeal to the king, basically saying that we're telling us, look, we are proud Englishmen. We are obeying everything. All we want is just to be given the same rights as British citizens. And King George III responded by saying, I'm declaring you in a state of rebellion, and from now on, you're under Admiralty rule rather than, colonial rule or whatever you said that one time. Yeah. And after that, it was like, well, fuck. What choice do we have?
Yeah, he was doing that. He even did that with the Scots, and they gave him a lot of trouble over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, George III just wasn't making friends around the world.
Although once we later learned about his personal health, we now realize why. Yeah. Yeah, didn't he have like dementia or something?
I'm not sure. I know that his son was regent for a lot of the time, but I don't know if that was during the American Revolution or not.
Yeah.
But for quite a number of years, um, it was his son George the Fourth, who was never king. So I don't know what they did with the numbering on that,
Yeah.
but
And
anyway,
speaking of
he was the regent for a long time. He was basically ruling in his father's place.
And speaking of American history, I hope one day Lord Killian gets to debunk Attention's, really cringeworthy Civil War videos. Yeah. By the way, Shane, he did a video explaining that tariffs were not one of the reasons why the South wanted to secede from the Union. And you know what his evidence he proved to show that it wasn't the tariffs? He showed one tariff report from 1 year, and it was from the port of New York. Not the port of
Wow.
Boston, not the port of Charleston, New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what about the everyone looks to the South Carolina secession document as if it's the end all and be all, but
Yeah.
each state was doing their own, and I don't remember what South Carolina had to say, but there were quite a few states that cited tariffs as one of the reasons for seceding.
Yeah. And not to mention, I remember you mentioning it somewhere that originally, when the South seceded, they didn't even want to form the Confederate States of America. They just wanted to be their own independent, states on their own. And it wasn't until the North decided we gotta send in, the National Guard on the border to make sure to plan an offensive on them, that they actually merged together to form the CSA, because they felt that if they didn't do that, the North would pick them off one by one.
Well, and that's the only reason why North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia seceded. Because they were getting
Yeah.
stuck in the middle of it. They were going to have to choose a side, and one way or another, the northern forces were just going to go, barreling through the state, destroying everything, and that's why they seceded. They're like, yeah, we're going to defend our state.
And I can't believe so many people still think that well, they attacked Fort Sumter, so the South started the war. It's like, yeah, you do realize what Fort Sumter was being used for, right?
Well, and where was it? I
Yeah, it
don't
was in.
know how you start a war by attacking your own port.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just something else a lot of people are
Yeah.
misinformed on because they're not taught it.
Oh yeah. And I can't tell you, in one of Attention's video, I got into an argument in the comments section because I pointed out all the war crimes committed by the North against the South and all that. And the subject of Dresden got brought up, and they were justifying the Dresden bombing.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they keep saying, "Oh no, it was actually very crucial because it contained an army garrison that was going to redeploy troops, to the Eastern Front." To which I said, funny, because I looked it up and that's not what the Allied intelligence said.
Yeah.
And not to mention, if that was the reason, then how come the bombers ignored the actual army garrison that was in Dresden? Why they target the city? If I recall correctly, an RAF commander even flat out said Dresden wasn't a military target; it was a failed attempt to try to terrorize the Germans into surrendering, and it produced the opposite effect. Yeah, people like them are the reason why Kurt Vonnegut wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, because I haven't read the book, but if I recall correctly, there's those aliens in it, and they have a bomb that's capable of blowing up an entire planet. And when the guy asks them, "Well, why would you invent such a device?" They're like, "Well, if we don't invent it, our enemies will invent it."
Well, and Vonnegut was there. He was a POW at Dresden.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. Yeah, that's why it's called Slaughterhouse-Five, because his POW camp was a former slaughterhouse, and he was there and saw the fire bombings. And if I recall correctly, he and some of the prisoners were allowed to temporarily leave their cells to aid in the rescue of people there.
Yeah, and I mean, you read what he wrote, separately from Slaughterhouse-Five. He wrote factually about what he experienced there and what it was like, and just the complete and utter devastation.
Yeah, I mean, if I recall correctly, there's even accounts of small attack fighters actually attacking ambulances and fire engines that were trying to fight the fires. But yeah, it's that's sadly how history is written. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't even written by the winners because that wasn't even what the winners were saying. It was just kind of like
Yeah.
history's apologists.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's so funny. I still find it so ironic that Hitler is treated as the ultimate evil, even though Stalin killed more people than all three Axis powers combined.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just yeah, it's just stupid how people don't pay attention or they take what their history teacher says as fact.
Or, you dare to be critical of the North and Lincoln, and they say, well, you just love the South. Is like, listen, I will absolutely say that the South committed a lot of war crimes too. I am not giving them a free pass in any way.
Yeah. And just to play the devil's advocate with the South Side, the only reason they ended up acting, the way they did is largely because the Union was doing it, and a lot of Southern commanders were like, "Well, fuck this! If the Union's gonna burn down villages and cities, then so the hell are we."
Yeah, Rachel Mao and Pol Pot, and look at all those terrible guys, including, Maduro and, the
Yep.
North Korean leaders. And what do they all have in common?
Yeah. Yeah. And Boris
Long word
Johnson.
begins with S.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Boris Johnson, but yeah.
Well, no, yeah, Boris Johnson wouldn't be, but
Well.
but I don't know. When you had that debate between him and Nigel Farage, I think it was Nigel Farage was one he was running against, the Labour Party guy. They were kind of seeming like they were clones of each other.
Yeah. Like I remember that one, where that one doctor said, "What are you going to do to fix the NIH without, throwing money at it because that doesn't work?" And what did they kept saying? "Oh, well, we are not going to cut the funding of the NIH and we are going to do everything to make sure it's well funded." It's like, that's not what the guy was asking.
Yeah, JC, you missed the explanation. This is kind of a temporary setup while I get the video drivers on my Windows machine sorted. But glad you can make it.
It just makes me wonder what's going to happen if the Bugaloo actually occurs, how the statists are going to react when they see they're kicked out and they have to sweep the streets they used to own. Are they going to actually confront themselves, or are they going to be like, "How did that happen? Yeah, it couldn't have been anything I did. Yeah, how did it happen?" I think that's the problem is that it's easy to think that all politicians behind closed doors, they're scumbags and con artists. But I like to think, and this is actually makes them much more dangerous, is that I think the majority of them actually have belief in themselves. Like they believe they actually have the ability to do the stuff they claim they can do.
Yeah.
And if anything, that makes them more dangerous because a con artist will usually fess up if he can point out the con. He'll run away, but he'll fess up to it. If a person believes in believing it, they are not going to change no matter how much evidence you point out there because they are just so ingrained in themselves, and it's going to take a big thing to happen for them to be convinced. Because like you said, how do you convince a guy who is absolutely positively certain that there's an invisible, intangible dragon in his garage, even when there's no evidence to the contrary? How do you convince him of that?
Yeah, when you start believing your own con,
Yep.
that's when you start really getting troubles.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the problem with Black Lives Matter and all the other groups is that they're believing in their own con. They legitimately believe they're victims, and that makes it hard. So that's why when you point out that they're not victims, that's why they get mad and threaten to attack you because they believe in what they believe in and they can't accept it.
Even when you just try and say that, the issue of, racist police needs to be solved by police accountability, and that's something we should all be able to get behind because it affects us all. Oh man, I have gotten so horrendously attacked for that.
Oh yeah, it's
because that's exactly like white supremacism, apparently.
Yeah. And that only shows me that I personally believe that the defund the police people, they don't really want to defund the police, they just want to get rid of the current police and just replace it with the Red Guard, as I jokingly say.
But I mean, if you do that, how are you going to do that and have all this gun control?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another thing for your how to argue for gun control that people don't want to argue is you have to acknowledge the gun in the room. Who's going to be enforcing these gun control laws? It's not going to be these voluntary militias or whatever, or people voluntarily turning their guns in. It's going to be, federal agents trespassing on territory. And as we saw with Ruby Ridge and Waco, that's not always going to end peacefully.
Yep. Oh, have you seen what's his name, Chipman? They're trying to deny now that he ever had anything to do with Waco, and the Twitter mob is trying to, cancel everyone who's trying to point out his role in Waco.
Isn't there like an actual video of him actually present at the site, when it was going on?
I think there's like a picture of him like standing, holding a rifle and standing over the ruins.
I know he wasn't the main guy behind it. He was just part of a team that was part of it. But from what I heard, he played a role in the responsibility of it.
Oh yeah, he has some decision making power.
Yeah,
the whole ATF was involved in that.
Yeah. Yeah, although South Park did get one thing wrong about Waco, it wasn't the ATF that burned down the complex. That was the FBI, but ATF did.
Well, they were together. They were doing it together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing too. So many people said, that it was all David Koresh's fault, when like the actual FBI commander himself has said multiple times in interviews that looking back now, he regrets what he did and he would have done things completely differently.
Well, and it's like that one radio guy said after it happened, it's like, look, we don't know who started the fire, and we probably never will, but consider this. And he mentioned, a time where it was like in, I think, the early 70s, where a standoff with the FBI turned deadly when tear gas turned to fire. Then you mentioned another one in the mid-70s where, there was a standoff with an FBI and tear gas led to an inferno, and he just kept rattling off several different ones. Standoff, tear gas, fire, death. Standoff, tear gas, fire, death. And he said, the FBI knows this happened, and yet they made no plan to put out a fire if one started.
Or change the accelerant, because if I recall correctly, the potential candidate that could have lit the fire was an accelerant they used in their tear gas cartridges. Because
it was what they used to make, because CS is normally a powder. You have to turn it into a gas. And of all, there's like 3 or 4 different options they have for that. The only one of those options that's not flammable is like extremely toxic to humans.
No rainbow asteroids. I mean, we don't really know. I mean,
it's pretty clear that the FBI, whether they did it deliberately or whether it was accidentally because of the tear gas, is another thing. But all of the survivors from the compound and everyone who knew, Koresh, because, he was well known and well liked among the community, said that there is no way that Koresh would have started that fire.
I think a perfectly good example that many people have pointed out that kind of proves that Koresh probably didn't start the fire is when they found his body, he didn't die from smoke inhalation or burns. He shot himself. Why would he, they asked him, why would he shoot himself if he's just going to set the place on fire? I know Jim Jones shot himself, at at his, at Jonestown when he committed suicide because he didn't want to go through the painful death of cyanide.
Actually, I
But
think there's some question that Jim Jones might have been killed by one of his followers. There were several followers that escaped before that happened.
yeah,
And what they were saying was their impression was Jones was doing it so he could kill off all his followers and then go and start over somewhere else, and that one of them had gone back and killed him. But of course, none of them were going to directly say that because then they would have been prosecuted. But that's kind of the thinking. One of them went back and killed him,
or they committed suicide themselves later. But yeah,
No, I mean this is from the surviving cult members who were like, you know what, we're out of here, we're done.
Yeah. And it's pretty funny because David Koresh, even though he was a nut job, he wasn't the same level as Jim Jones. And in fact, if I recall correctly, he told his own followers, listen, if you do not want to die with me for the cause, feel free to leave. I'll let you leave. And the reason why they didn't leave was because when they went outside, the FBI would point guns at them and say, go back in the building and wait for us.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't really any more nutty than your average end times preacher.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would argue he was less nutty than Jim Jones, because Jim Jones legitimately wouldn't let his people leave. If they said, listen, Mr. Jones, I don't believe in communism anymore. I don't believe in this. Can I leave? He'd have you beaten.
Yeah, Rachel, I don't know if anyone really knows what happened there, because the survivors had basically gotten out before that happened, so it's a lot of speculation. But like, what's the guy's name? Thibodeau, the one that wrote the book, and it's one of the books that they based the miniseries on. Just the difficulty he had getting out when the fire started. He had to go out the back. He was trying to, just get out so he wouldn't be shot. There were other people who tried to get out from a way that the FBI had blocked off.
I mean, the truth is, apparently, from what I heard, even though South Park got the wrong agency in their episode, all that stuff at the meteorite party where the ATF thinks that it's a cult that's trying to commit suicide, a lot of the stuff that they do in that episode is apparently stuff the FBI actually did, such as playing really loud, bad music, 24/7 to quote unquote, make them so annoyed they'll want to come out. Although the thing is, I actually read the truth was actually far worse, because contrary to what Matt Stone and Trey Parker said, they didn't play Cher music. They actually played really bad music. They played sounds of nails on a chalkboard, and they even played like death cries of rabbits getting slaughtered.
Yeah, JC, if you're talking about the one on Netflix, the miniseries, that is based on a book from one of the FBI guys and a book from one of the Branch Davidians. And I mean, it's very even-handed, and it pretty much told what happened, and it very much tracks with my memory of it. So yeah, it's good. Definitely watch that one.
Yeah. Though, to be fair, Shane, I think it's said that Waco's talked about, but not Ruby Ridge, and I think I know why. Because whereas Waco, one could play a devil's advocate for the federal agents, with Ruby Ridge, there was no freaking way, because.
But as I remember the miniseries, I think it starts out covering Ruby Ridge.
Yeah.
Because that's all that leads up to it.
Yeah. Because Ruby Bridge is a scenario where even the devil would look at the FBI and the U.S. Marshals and say, wow, you guys are fucked up. Yeah, it's.
If you're going to shoot an unarmed woman holding a baby, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw one. I saw one comment in a video about Ruby Ridge where one guy was playing some gallows humor. The joke was, I can almost imagine what what that sniper was thinking. Okay, what do I see here? I see two armed guys shooting at the U.S. Marshals. I see Randy Weaver pointing a gun at the U.S. Marshals. Okay. Oh my God, it's a woman with a baby. She's coming right at me. Fires.
Well, and one thing that comes across was the fact that they didn't really have to do any of that. It's just that they kind of got like this kind of gung-ho mentality. Yeah, we're going to take down this dangerous fugitive. And
well, yeah, I mean, for instance, I mean, like, if I recall correctly, you know, the best way to put it, Randy Weaver was just a guy who wanted to live off his own, and he was a survivalist, but the FBI were like, they thought that he was in charge of a cult, that he had explosives, he was an ex-Green Beret and knew how to kill people with his bare hands, when in reality, he was simply a former U.S. Army Corps engineer, and his past experience, again, was just working in standard civil engineering. So, and the only guns he had were hunting weapons.
Yeah, Rachel, the miniseries definitely goes into that. Although, again, how much of that he was actually doing and with how many of them is a subject of a lot of debate.
Yeah. And like I said, to play the devil's advocate, you know, some of the men in the Branch Davidians, they were okay with their wives getting impregnated by Koresh because they saw him as the Messiah. And, you know, look, you know, religion makes people do crazy things. So,
yeah.
You know, but, you know, and again, and this is what I always tell people who are anti-cult, you know, no matter what you think of David Koresh, you still have to agree burning down the complex and doing what the FBI did was not the way to deal with it, you know.
Yeah, it kind of reminds you of My Lai.
My Lai?
The Vietnamese village. We had to save the village by destroying it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where they just burned the village and just killed everyone in it.
Yeah, I saw a video about that one, and you know, the weirdest thing is that I've heard that for a long time. The story was, you know, the guys went in there with the intention of burning it down, but from what I heard, I've actually heard that what really happened was they got on the ground, saw that the village wasn't occupied by the Viet Cong, and they contacted their superiors saying, "Hey, these aren't Viet Cong, they're just civilians. What should we do?" And their commander said, "Burn it down anyway." Yeah. Yeah. Which, in all honesty, wouldn't surprise me because a lot of that shit was happening in Vietnam. There were plenty of times where the United States military would come across like a farm or a village and say, "Hey, this isn't enemy territory. You know, I don't think these people are Viet Cong. What should we do?" And the military was like, "Well, burn it down just in case."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does everyone say to things like that? Well, these things happen in war. Well, maybe that's why we shouldn't have them.
Yeah. And you know what's the really stupidest thing ever about Ruby Ridge, though, Shane? This was all because Randy Weaver was framed by an ATF agent, and he wanted to fight it out in court, and the clerk sent him the wrong court date, so then the U.S. Marshals got called in.
Yeah, which is why they thought he was a fugitive.
Yeah. Yeah, if I recall correctly, the clerk sent him the wrong date, so they thought that it was, you know, the month. So they thought it was a month ahead of the actual date. So now the U.S. Marshals were in there, and then for some reason the FBI were like, "Oh my, we've got a dangerous fugitive. He's gonna kill us all. We got to go in there and take him." Yeah, not only was Randy's wife killed, also his son was killed too. And you know, and it's pretty funny because they try to justify and say, "Oh, but Randy Weaver's son and his friend who was there, they shot and killed a U.S. Marshal." Well, Randy Weaver's son never did that, and according to Randy Weaver's friend who was there when it happened, they didn't know it was the U.S. Marshals. All they saw were these guys dressed in blacks holding M16 rifles. Yeah, they didn't announce themselves. They didn't say we're with the U.S. Marshals. Put your hands in the air. They just shot and killed their hunting dogs and then aimed the guns at them. You know, Sammy Weaver thought they were being attacked by their rivals because they were having issues with one of their neighbors.
Yeah, and doing that was what led a lot of people to say, "Wait a minute, why do we need an ATF?" And apparently the idea was, you know, you go to Waco and you concoct all these, false accusations against Koresh because he was an FFL. And, of course, he had all these completely legal firearms there. And it's pretty clear that they tried doing this even, parading all these firearms around. Oh, look at all of these dangerous firearms they had. Although it turns out every single firearm he had was completely legal.
Yeah. And like, if I recall correctly, you mentioned that while some of them were fully automatic, they had an FFL and they could do that. Yeah, you can convert semi-automatic weapons into automatic as long as you have, an FFL license and all that.
Well, there's like a ton of different restrictions, including passing some of the strictest FBI background checks there are, and Koresh passed them all.
Yep. And going back to Ruby Ridge, what else kind of shows that the FBI was acting way out of control is that according to one of the coordinators, when he arrived on the scene and got the orders, they were basically told, if you see Randy Weaver or his family, shoot him on sight. And he was like, wow, that was the toughest, rules of engagement I've ever seen. It's like with Ruby Ridge, there was no attempt. They didn't even attempt to figure out a peaceful way to arrest Randy Weaver. It was all about, nope, we got to treat him like he's an enemy combatant.
Yeah.
And everyone wonders, oh, why did Timothy McVeigh do what he did? Well, I'm not condoning what Timothy McVeigh did, but when you treat your own citizens like they're enemy combatants, how do you expect them to react?
But I mean, they'd done the exact same thing with David Koresh, showed up and, armed, forces and everything and, start firing everywhere when, according to all of the people in the community, including the local police, all they had to do was knock.
Yeah, I remember reading somewhere the sheriff said, look, if Koresh is truly, a criminal, look, send me to serve the warrant. I'll go there. I know a lot of these people. I'll go there. I'll convince them, to come back to come quietly. But they were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go get them ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, they were even doing things like, putting up banners saying, like, we want a lawyer, we want to talk to, legal counsel and things like that. Yeah, I mean, that's one of your basic rights.
Yep. Yeah, but now it's gone from that to, it's like, but what about my constitutional rights? And the FBI guys are like, I don't see no constitution.
Yeah.
I know a perfectly good article for the Babylon Bee, where it says the head of the FBI says, wait a minute, America has a constitution? I thought that thing in the National Archives was just a funny art piece.
Yeah. FBI and Congress members shocked to discover America has a constitution.
Yeah.
That could be that line.
Well, then again, I mean, they actually already shown that a lot of members in the news media don't really know the Constitution either. Like when Rachel Maddow tried to debunk that guy by saying you're wrong. That's the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution doesn't have a preamble.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll admit, I haven't read much of the Constitution other than the Bill of Rights. But to be fair, and you've said this in your constitutional lecture videos, other than the Bill of Rights, the average citizen doesn't have to, nor should they have to read the Constitution because it doesn't apply to us. It's rules for the government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that happened just recently that... Oh God! It was one of these cases that's coming up, and someone was saying it's one of those lingering anti-Trump things going on, and they were talking one of those like lawsuits and everything, and in their filings they were saying like, well, Bill Barr had said that the president has all of the executive power in the country, and it was just talking about how iffy that is. It's like, read the first sentence of Article 2. That's exactly what it says. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. period. And I was like, wow, so you've not even read the Constitution as far as Article 2, and yet here you are filing this legal document against a former president.
Yeah. Or I can also imagine if you ask the senators and the congressmen and all that, you really grill them. It's like, did you guys read the Constitution? And if you grill them enough, they'll go, okay, we haven't read it. We skimmed it. But then again, considering the fact that they don't read the bills, they don't really read the bills they pass through Congress, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I would be a bad president in the eyes of that, because I would be like, okay, I have a question about this bill, this Save the Babies bill. Why is there a writer that says I will appropriate, X amount of money to the F-35 project? What does that have to do with saving the babies?
Well, and if I'm president and they send me, the Cute Puppies and Rainbow Act, and it's like, 2,000 pages long, my veto statement is going to be TL semicolon DR.
Hey, that's my idea. Yeah. Yeah, it's like why did President Hangartner veto his law? What was his reasons? His reasons. I President Hangartner veto this bill. My reasoning, teal deer. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
ridiculous.
yeah. I like how there was one senator who actually is for legal reform. Like, he's a legit senator. He once jokingly said, I think it was on John Stossel, that if the bill is longer than the Bible, I think you're doing something wrong. Yeah. Fun fact,
How
apparently
about if the bill is longer than the entire Constitution?
Yeah. I mean, you were talking about the Red River Relief Act and all that. Apparently there were some funny writers on the COVID Relief Package Act.
Oh yeah, there always are.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a term for them. They're called earmarks.
Well, earmarks are specifically about spending. When, they're putting in, money for their districts and their buddies and things like that.
Oh.
But yeah, they put in all sorts of other crazy stuff too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like you said, they flat out have known to been put laws in there. You know what I would also love to do as a senator? I would love to add my own writer to a bill if I ever became a senator, that says all bills that are passed have writers on them that have nothing to do with the title of the bill are herefore nullified, just to see if anyone notices it.
The one subject at a time. Yeah, it'd be funny if that got passed by a writer. Stick it on as a writer to the NDAA.
Yeah, and then I can declare all the other this bill is invalid, and they say no, it isn't. There's no law on the writer that says that if it has one topic only, if it has more than one topic, it's invalid. Then I point to that writer, and they're like, God damn it, why don't we read did anyone read the damn thing? And they're all looking at them like, I read the thing I put on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's something to do because it's in the Constitution that revenue bills have to originate in the House. So what they do is in the Senate, when they want, to do some revenues, they just stick it on as a rider to an existing bill that did originate in the House. Or like, okay, it's a bill and it raises revenues and it originated in the House.
Yeah. Like I said, someone should just some senator or representative should just make a funny, writer that puts in there, and then when it gets passed, to point it out, just to prove that, to prove it's like, to prove like a good example is, maybe put in Vermin Supreme's promise that every American has to get a pony now, and point that out, saying now the United States government has to find a way to give every American a pony. And they're like, when did we approve that? And then say, well, it was in the rider in the Protect the Puppies Act.
Hey, Rachel, if you could please avoid putting in links to illegal material and getting me kicked off of YouTube, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we're believers in freedom of speech, but, just like with my court case, the sad truth is you have to be practical at times, Yeah. Kind of reminds me of this one website I'm a part of, and I'm not going to go into too much details because it's a little bit not safe for work. But the guy had to update his policy, had to update his acceptance policy, and he deleted a lot of content. And I'm not going to go into too much details for obvious purposes, but let's just say it meant that a lot of the high school romantic stories and artwork that a lot of people like meant it was illegal. It was banned, and everyone was mad at him and all that. And he said, "Listen, I'm upset as much as you do. The reason why I did it is because I had authorities on my door saying that's CP. You got to get rid of it." And it's all artwork and stories. That's a law I can't understand. It's like, you hear stories about how it's like, oh, we found this guy with CP on his computer, and it's all Japanese anime and all that. And it's like, that's not CP, that's just drawings. Messed up drawings, yeah, but still drawings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a drawing. It's ink on paper.
Have you ever seen the famous "This Is Not a Pipe" picture?
Oh yeah, Treachery of Images by Rene Magritte. Yeah.
Yeah, I made a joke like that one time where I went on Google and I found a photo of a horse and I posted it to my friends and I asked them, "What is this?" And they're all like, "Well, it's a horse." I said, "No, it's not a horse." They're like, "Is it a pony?" "No." "Well, what is it?" "It's not a horse. It's a photograph of a horse.
Yeah, it's a picture of a horse." Yep.
Yeah, you can't get on it and ride it, so it's not a horse.
I made one meme back when the whole 3D printed ghost gun, controversy was going on. And so I had Magritte's Treachery of Images. I redid, This Is Not a Pipe to be in English because originally it was in French. And then I had a screenshot of Blender with a 3D model of a gun in it. And underneath that, I put, "This is not a gun."
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean, The Dead Man's Chest. It's like, "Captain, did you find the key?" "No, even better. I found the drawing of a key."
Although, actually, that'll do it for you. But hackers have done that. So someone takes an Instagram picture of themselves and they're holding their, car keys or their house key, and the hacker is like, "Oh, now I've got a picture of it. Now I know how to take a key blank and carve out the key in the exact shape, and I can get into their house."
Yeah.
They even did that with the TSA, because the TSA had these universal keys that they used to get into their special locks, and they had pictures of them on their websites. And so hackers looked at that and made their own universal keys.
Yep.
And then they can get into anything the TSA could.
Well, yeah, you know how the government is with cybersecurity. Yeah.
Yeah. And people wonder why I don't like those know your customer anti-money laundering laws where, if you get if you want to get an account on a crypto exchange that exchanges from crypto to fiat, you have to send them all your information, including a picture of yourself holding your driver's license. It's like, yeah, how long is it going to take for one of those to get hacked? And now everyone's driver's licenses are on the dark web.
Yeah. And to be fair, we wouldn't have that problem if we didn't need driver's license. I actually saw a video saying that the real reason why they require driver's license is actually because when you think about it, a driver's license is just a state ID,
Yeah, it's a backdoor ID.
Yeah,
and no one would get one if it weren't for the requirement you need one to drive.
Yeah, the government, has wanted a state ID system for as early as I think World War I, but every time they've tried to do it, people kept protesting saying that's a violation of privacy and the government has no right doing it. So then they realized, hey, there's these cars that are becoming very popular. I have an idea. Under the guise that we're trying to protect safety, let's mandate it that you have to have a license proving you know how to drive a car, and said license just happens to have most of your personal information on it.
Yeah, and they say, well, we can do that because driving is a privilege, not a right. Of course, anyone who's read the Ninth Amendment knows the problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah, driving is a privilege, not a right. But I thought it was your right to go anywhere.
Yeah, you have the right to liberty of movement, and you have the right to travel on the right of way.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard there have been cases where some states have flat out said, there actually are requirements you have to have before you move into the state, and a lot of people are like, "Why?"
Yeah, I mean, they're not supposed to be able to have anything like that, but
Yeah,
again,
I
as
know.
long as no one stops them.
Yeah, I know. I was ranting to you about that when I was talking about my casing. It's like, like what Wisconsin's been doing to me. It has violated so many, so many constitutional amendments that I just want to know what the hell makes them think that they're exempt from the Constitution. And like you said, they just say, "Oh, well, some judge, in this one case, 30 years ago said we could do it." You know
Yeah,
what else is
the Supreme Court cases are kind of like the Bible. You can go through and pick and choose anything you want to say. There's a case
yeah.
somewhere where they say what you want them to.
Yeah, I brought this up to Shane before we started, but it's like, if people want to say, well, states have the right to pass, gun control, even though it's technically unconstitutional because the Supreme Court said that they're allowed to pass reasonable regulations. I want to say, yeah, you know what the Supreme Court also once said? They also said blacks could never have citizenships of the United States, even if they were freed. Segregation was constitutional as long as the facilities were quote unquote equal. Forcing men to fight a war was perfectly okay, as was interning Japanese people, and what as was and performing eugenics policies on the mentally disabled people.
Yeah, the Supreme
They
Court certainly is no arbiter of right and wrong.
Yeah. And a funny thing too, and this goes back to the whole shouting fire in a crowded theater that you talk about. Everyone says, "Oh, this judge, this Supreme Court judge said a long time ago, saying you can't shout fire in a crowded theater," completely ignoring the context that he was actually comparing it to. And as you pointed out, looking back, he later said, "Yeah, I was wrong about that. That was stupid of me to say that."
Yep.
Yeah,
It was
so
Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. who came up with the fire in a crowded theater, and
yeah,
if he were still
and like
alive today, he might say that would be the biggest regret of his life using that phrase, because everyone uses that to
yeah,
justify whatever abridgment of the First Amendment they want to do.
yeah. Yeah, like, as I think you pointed this out, like, listen, there is only one rule that said about the amendments where that your amendments do not protect you against, and that's if you're on someone else's property. Because I think you mentioned this. If you shout fire in a crowded theater and there's no fire, the police can't do anything. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the theater owner's gonna say, "Yeah, you, what's your name? Oh, this is my name. Yeah, you're never allowed in here again." That'll happen, but the police can't arrest you for it.
Yeah, but they were saying that in the context of a criminal case. A guy
Yeah,
who had been arrested for protesting the draft.
yeah. Yeah, I am shocked how they got away with the draft, even though that technically violates the 13th Amendment because forcing someone to do something they don't want to do against their will, that's a form of slavery. But they were like, "Oh no, because it says right here in the powers of the Constitution, we can mobilize a defense." And I'm
Actually,
like,
that
"Yeah, but
wasn't even what they said. What the Supreme
oh,
Court said about the draft, this was a different case, but someone challenged the draft on 13th Amendment issues, and the only thing they said about that was, well, we can't think of a reason why they would have included the draft, so it doesn't include the draft.
oh,
JC, I know no one has ever shouted fire in a movie theater, but people would likely shut the fuck up. Christopher Hitchens actually did that once.
yeah,
Started one of his talks by yelling fire, a talk on free speech. He
yeah."
said, yes, I can do that.
Mm. Yeah, Chris Hitchens. I mean, he got a lot of things wrong, but when he was right on some stuff, oh, he was awesome. The only thing I don't like about Chris Hitchens was that he was a shill for the Iraq War because he was a big proponent of it, but not everyone's perfect. And to be fair, I've actually heard from some people say one reason why some people think that actually showed why Christopher Hitchens was at least, better than other atheists, because there was a big, issue with the atheist community where atheists were being told, "Oh, you also got to be PC though," and they were only making fun of, Christians and Jews but wouldn't touch Muslims, but Christopher Hitchens is like, "No, I don't care if you're a Hindu, Muslim, whatever, you're gonna get criticized by me regardless." And he did that. He made a lot of wrote a lot of books and speeches, criticizing Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and a lot. Mm. Oh no, Shane's typing it on a computer. He's gonna hack something.
No, I'm trying to find that Supreme Court case I was thinking of.
Oh. Kind of reminds me of that one idiot. I think it was idiot extraordinaire from a long time ago. I can't remember which one, but it was a woman who reported a guy, because she thought that he was hacking into an airplane to cause it to blow up, and they found the guy's laptop, and it turns out it wasn't him hacking a computer. It was just his computer booting up. Because sometimes when your computer boots up, the screen is black and like all this computer jargon code pops up, and that's what she saw.
Yeah, the postcodes.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy posted, yeah, the guy said, "This, I'm not hacking anything. It's just my computer booting up."
Yeah.
You know, I did,
Not
you,
coming
kn-
up
you know,
with
I
it.
did, I did see a funny joke though one time where it was, what if the founding fathers were brought back today and they saw how bad it is, and they go into the White House saying, "Don't worry, people, we will help you regain your freedom that this country was built on, and I will convince your current leaders that they are wrong." And then it says a few minutes later, and it shows all the founding fathers in prison. Oh yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that if they could, some of these modern politicians, they would throw the founding fathers in prison if they could.
Okay, I found it. It's just called selective draft law cases, where they just threw a whole bunch of cases about the draft together. And this was in 1918. And here is everything they have to say about the draft and the 13th Amendment. Finally, as we are unable to conceive upon what theory the exaction by government from the citizen of the performance of his supreme and noble duty of contributing to the defense of the rights and honor of the nation as the result of a war declared by the great representative body of the people, oh my God, is this a cult or what? Can be said
Yeah.
can be said to be the imposition of involuntary servitude in violation of the principles of the 13th Amendment, we are constrained to the conclusion that the contention to that effect is refuted by its mere statement. Yeah, it's a complete argument from incredulity. Oh, we can't think of it, and it's your supreme and noble duty, and why would you not want to do that?
Even though Germany was of no threat to the United States in World War I, we only got involved because Britain tricked us into getting involved. And no, people, the Zimmerman telegram never would have happened if the British weren't lying about Germany to the rest of the world, saying, "Oh yeah, the Germans, they're going around, they're kicking puppies, eating babies, turning women into newts, all that stuff."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It never even made any sense to me because Germany didn't even start the war.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that scene. I can imagine a Monty Python sketch making fun of that. It's like, how do you know the Germans started the war? They did it all right. Yeah, they did it. They turned they turned me into a newt. They turned you into a newt? I got better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, World War One. It was the you know how many modern problems we wouldn't have if World War One never occurred.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Ninth Amendment, Fish Ron, the thing that just because a right isn't listed here in the Constitution, that doesn't mean it's not a right.
Yep.
So, I mean, anyone who says, oh, well, that's not a right because it's not in the Constitution. Well, they haven't read the Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that over and over again. According to the Constitution, your rights come naturally. They come naturally. They're from you being a sapient, living being.
Yeah, there isn't a single point in the Constitution where it says, this right is hereby granted or whatever. In every single case, it talks about your rights as if they already existed previously, and the Constitution is just protecting them.
Oh yeah, hell, when they finally gave, rights to the blacks and African Americans, they didn't say the right to do this and that is hereby granted to blacks. They just said you can no longer, they just said that race was no longer a ground to restrict a right.
Yeah, and Fishron, if you consider not only how people feel about their cars, but about how, whenever you go to apply for a job, one of the questions is, do you have reliable transportation? When you look at all of that, it's not just a right, it's a necessity. So, the idea that driving is a privilege is a fucking joke.
Oh, yeah.
And one that isn't funny at all.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, fun fact, it's not a lot of people realize this, but in China, traveling is considered a privilege, and they can take that right away from you whether they want to or not.
Well, what do you think the TSA is doing?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think's happened, in all this COVID stuff? Oh, you're not allowed to, be out without a mask. You're not allowed to go out in groups of, 3 or more, or, whatever it is.
Yeah, that joke I tell some of my British, friends on Discord, it's like you're being arrested by the British police because you're outside, without a quote unquote good reason for being so. Then you point to the police saying, officer, there's a guy getting mugged right behind you. Why are you arresting me? You should be helping that guy. And they go, and now don't you change the subject now. We're not talking about them.
It's like the guy who got arrested for possessing a potato peeler.
Yeah.
And they said it was because he couldn't come up with a good reason to have a potato peeler. What about peeling potatoes?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like people were making a joke like that, making fun of the UK, saying, "What's next? Are you gonna, arrest people for having kitchen utensils without a license?" And the British were like, "Oh, that would never happen." A year later, this guy was arrested in Stamfordshire because he had I don't know what it is, but I remember reading it somewhere, because he had a potato peeler and a butter knife.
Well, and there was one time where they confiscated a spoon. And this was one of the cases where they were like showing off everything they had confiscated, and they had all specifically laid out everything that all of these horrible weapons that they had confiscated, and one of them was a spoon.
Yeah. Also reminds me of this one case in the UK where they arrested this one guy, who was a survivalist and all that. They arrested him, and they talked about how he had a cache of weapons and he had a weapons arsenal, and they showed the image, and almost all of them were just 22 caliber target rifles and a revolver and a homemade shotgun. That was it. Yeah. It's like they were acting like he was building bombs or nuclear weapons, but no, he just had a couple of 22 bolt action target rifles and a few shotguns he made in his spare time. Oh no, gas, the horror. Yeah, from what I've heard,
but that those gun buybacks were because you always get a lot of homemade shotguns for that.
Yeah.
Couldn't possibly be that they made them specifically to go sell them at the buyback.
Yeah. Does your gun fire? I don't know, and I don't want to risk it. Yeah. Hell, you could probably...
No, you can actually build a functioning Slimefire shotgun for like $20 of parts at any hardware store. So you do that. Then you go to the gun buy back, you get 150 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then you go do it again, $20, and then you get, that's $130 clear profit from that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there was actually a case, where one state, I think it might have been California, but I can't remember, where they're actually flat out, because because it's easy to make a gun using machinist tools, they're literally just saying, okay, from now on, you can't have machinist tools unless you have a mechanic's license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're talking about that here. They're just losing their little panties over ghost guns.
Yeah. And then you ask them what is a ghost gun, and then they say it's that gun in Call of Duty.
No, it's a gun without a serial number that's been homemade or whatever.
Yeah.
And there is no law against that whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you want to sell it or give it to someone else, then yeah, there are laws that are in place. But if you make it for your own purposes.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh yeah, JC, because people are always like, well, hey, why did China, were they not clever enough to invent the fork and the knife and the spoon and all that? It's like, okay, first of all, these guys invented everything else. Yeah, they could. And two, we know they did because they cooked with them. But yeah, it was chopsticks because, the government wouldn't let them have knives and forks because they were weapons.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the ancient Chinese, they invented everything. I mean, hell, they even had an electrical battery, and it wasn't like with the Romans where they invented it but didn't really have a use for it, so they just invented it as a curiosity. The Chinese actually used it. I think they used it for like polishing metal or something.
Well, I think they used it for like galvanizing metal and gold plating and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
but that's like all those crazy ninja weapons, because like nunchucks or rice thrashers and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, most ninja weapons were just farming tools that were modified so they could be used as weapons or war or battlefield tools should the need arise.
They're not really like, when you see like the ninja movies, they make them look like the ultimate weapons. They actually kind of suck at weapons, but it was what they had.
Yeah, because most ninjas, came from the peasant stock, and they were legally not allowed to own swords because you had to be of the samurai class to legally own a sword. If you had a sword and you were not a samurai, even if you obtained it, quote unquote, legally or voluntarily, they would say, no, you've committed an ultimate crime and your sentence is death.
Yeah, I mean, everything they were doing was basically guerrilla tactics.
Yeah. I mean, that's another funny thing we see in a lot of ninja movies is they always talk about how, and remember, a ninja fights with honor. And I've heard from a lot of people who are ninjutsu practitioners that have said, no, if you read the ninjutsu training program, it is not about honor. It is about fighting dirty, fighting quote unquote unfairly, because the truth is,
and if I fight, they would have lost.
Yeah, if a samurai and a ninja went head to head in broad daylight, the samurai would win 9 out of 10 times
because they had the weapons. Shot-Diversity's little drama about nunchucks is really entertaining, but I like how we called it a limp stick.
Yeah,
he's like, I've got a stick. This stick is better than nunchucks. And like someone had said that, well, the thing about nunchucks as opposed to a stick is that you can conceal nunchucks, and the only thing he really needed to do to refute that is just stand there with a walking stick.
Yeah.
Because he got a walking stick that was not only some pretty solid wood, but also had one of those knob-type handles that was like solid steel. He was like, it's basically a mace. You can whack someone with that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I've actually heard that's actually the reason why a lot of why a lot of gentlemen in the English times carried canes was because, guns, back then, guns, weren't very reliable and they were very expensive, and that's literally what the cane was for. Deadliest Warrior, that show was largely stupid to begin with. I mean, that was the same
Why
TV
does that
show
sound like one of those crappy Discovery Channel or History Channel type shows that
it aired on Spike TV. It's where they took quote unquote, scientific stats from warriors from around the world and pitted them, but a lot of them were pretty stupid, and there were quite a few infamous episodes. Probably the most infamous one that really pissed off a lot of historians was they pitted Joan of Arc against William the Conqueror, and they said, well, Joan of Arc was better because she had access to better weapons and better armor. But many historians are pointing out, but here's the thing about Joan of Arc: she wasn't a warrior. She never fought. She was more like a glorified cheerleader. She was a glorified cheerleader, not a warrior.
Yep.
Versus William the Conqueror, who was literally bred right from the get-go to be a fighter. He was trained since he was a little boy to be a conqueror of nations.
I'm sure someone has done that, JC, but it's I don't know if that would even really be necessary, especially if you've seen everything Shadiversity has been able to do with a stick.
Oh yeah. Well, and to be fair, for nunchucks things, and other people fail to realize, when they say, "Oh, nunchucks are terrible weapons," is that ninja often didn't use nunchucks as weapons. They used them for things like, grappling or holding on to tree branches. Because they weren't just weapons; they were tools.
Well, and again, it was because, oh, here's a rice thresher. I'll grab that and use that because I don't have anything else available.
Yeah.
And so much of what the ninja were doing were about things like distraction. So if you could have a stick in one hand and you could conceal nunchucks in the other, and you're waving the stick around, someone, is paying attention to that, you reach around and kind of thwack them with the end of the nunchucks, and they don't see that. They think there's someone else there. Shurikens are the same way. Shurikens are terrible weapons. They don't do anything. But if you can throw a shuriken and graze someone with it, then they're going to think there's an invisible swordsman around somewhere or something like that.
Yeah. Or, even just, they see the shuriken, so they lift up, like their armor to block it. And in that opportunity, you get away. Or if you're close enough and see an opportunity, you can slash them, with an actual weapon.
Yeah. And like if you look at the historical shuriken, basically take a nail, sharpen the other end, weld them together. That was the shuriken. They weren't these like fancy little throwing star things because you were only going to use them once, and then, there wasn't any idea that you were going to retrieve them afterwards. They were just something that you threw around as a distraction.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, that's another thing too that I saw a ninja expert say about shurikens, is that shurikens themselves weren't really weapons. Like you said, they were distractions, and in some cases they wouldn't even throw them at a person. They would just do something like, if they were trying to get like a guard to leave his post, they would take a shuriken, throw it at a bush. The guard would hear the snapping of the shuriken hitting the bush, so he would say, "Hey, what's that?" and leave his post, and then you sneak into there, because again, that's what a lot of ninjas mostly did. It was mostly spying and sabotaging.
Yeah, Mr. No, the idea was you weren't fighting them head on. You were trying to, be not invisible, like all dressed in black and, hiding somewhere, but invisible, like, dressed up as like an old peasant pushing a wheelbarrow, someone that they wouldn't notice, they wouldn't take any note of, but then you kind of, when they're not looking, you throw a shuriken and it slices them and they're like, well, who was that? And they don't see anyone there because, their attitudes towards the peasantry was that they literally didn't see them.
Yeah.
And so as long as you didn't, make
kind of like how in a lot of popular TV shows of Robin Hood, they portray Robin Hood as, when he goes into the city, he dresses himself as a blind beggar, so people won't recognize him. So when they come alongside, they go, "Hey, you beggar, did you see anyone suspicious?" And he would be like, "What?"
Yeah, you dropped out there for a second.
Oh, sorry. I saw one favorite funny parody though that made fun of the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie where he covers himself in horse poo to repel any guards that pull him over, and the joke was that the guard doesn't fall for the disguise, and he's like, I don't get it. How did you see through my disguise? I even covered horse poop on me so you would be repulsed by me. And the guy goes, it's the 11th century. We all smell like horse poo.
Yeah, exactly. God,
Yeah.
that was a dumb movie. The Kevin Costner Robin Hood. Oh God, that was so dumb. If it weren't for Alan Rickman, no one would have liked that movie.
Yeah, Alan Rickman. Yeah, I'll gouge your heart out with a spoon. And then his right-hand man's like, spoon? It's dull, it would hurt more. Yeah, Alan Rickman.
He was great.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a cartoon called The Infinity Train, and there's actually a depressed robot in that cartoon, and the guy who plays the voice acting, you can tell he's trying to impersonate Alan Rickman by Alan Rickman. Yeah. I'm sorry, 1-1, your depressed site is funny, but not as much as Alan Rickman as Marvin. Yeah.
Although I have to say, I do prefer the Stephen Moore voice as Marvin. Yeah. Maybe it's because I heard it first and that's the one that's in my head, but...
Yeah. I thought you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed. Well, maybe there's an assignment we'll send you to that'll take it off your mind. It won't work. I have an exceptionally large mind.
Yeah, it's funny because when they made the TV series, the miniseries back in 1980, they had the guy who was playing Marvin, you know, in the suit, and he was walking around saying all of the lines and everything that was going to be dubbed over by Stephen Moore later. Stephen Moore had voiced him in the radio series. And they also had Dave Prowse on there playing Hot Black Desiato's bodyguard. And so the guy who's playing Marvin talked to him and was like, okay, I'm playing Marvin, but not doing the voice. You played Darth Vader, but didn't do the voice. He says, why didn't they let you do the voice of Darth Vader? And he said, Dave Prowse responded, I have no idea.
Yeah, because David Prowse had basically the British equivalent of a country accent, and
yeah, it's a West Country accent, yeah.
Yeah, and if you listen to like the undubbed clips of Darth Vader, yeah, I mean, you can even tell some of the cast members are trying hard not to laugh because he's like, you are a part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Yeah, it's like,
he also has a very slight speech impediment, which,
yeah,
I mean, for the roles he's played hasn't been bad, but I mean, for Darth Vader, yeah.
Yeah. Mr. No, Marvin, yeah. It's like, Marvin, what have you, our ship is in trouble. What have you been doing? I've been talking to the ship's computer, and it hates me. Yeah.
I still like the one that was like, how did you stop the police cruiser? I had a conversation with its computer. And? It committed suicide.
Yeah.
Or when he tortures some guards by putting on a tape of his life story. In the beginning I was made. I didn't ask to be made. No one consulted my feelings on the matter. My first and only true friend was a small rat. One day it crawled inside a small cavity in my foot and died. I have a horrible feeling it's still there.
Yeah.
Oh,
something tells me that Marvin was written because Douglas Adams was making fun of, all those edgy, nihilistic people that were saying, what is the point of life? And everyone's like, oh, these are great philosophers. And it's like, no, if you actually were to take those guys and put them in real life, you'd find them depressing and like, dude, we don't want to be around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I still like that one line from the movie where it's like, well, this is how it's going to end. My planet's destroyed and I'm thousands of miles and I'm thousands of light years away, freezing to death with a manically depressed robot. You think you've got problems? What are you supposed to do if you are a manically depressed robot?
Oh yeah, Mr. No, the frog star robot that was going to get him. Yeah, he convinces him to shoot out the floor, and he falls down. They're all through the floors and gets destroyed. And Marvin says, "What a depressingly stupid machine."
Yeah.
That whole conversation with the frog star robot.
Yeah. I still hate how people, don't like, the modern movie, like with Alan Rickman. They're like, oh, it's not too much like that, even though Douglas Adams, worked on it before he died. And I remember him saying in interviews that he says if you're going to adopt it, whether into a play or a movie, it should be different from the book. I kind of wrote it so you can't imitate the book, because there are scenes that are in the book that are impossible to imitate in the film.
Yep.
Yeah. And
and so much that's just really difficult to do. Like in a radio show, you can say that Zaphod has two heads and have him argue with his heads, but what are you gonna do? You're gonna have this animatronic head that kind of lolls around and isn't very convincing, or what?
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of like what they did in the movie with Alan Rickman, where like he has one head and it's like those flip, toys where like you can flip the head.
Yeah, Sam Rockwell, yeah. His head flips up, yeah.
Yeah. And what was that one religion called where they think that the world was created by a sneeze and the apocalypse is coming because eventually the god that sneezed is going to wipe away the universe with a tissue?
The Great Green Arkle Seizure, yeah.
Yeah.
The Jatravartids of Viltvodal 6. Small blue creatures with over 50 arms each, who were therefore the first race in history to invent the aerosol deodorant before the wheel.
Oh. Yeah, and of course there's the Vogons, where life created them but then gave up on them almost immediately.
I like the fact that they're not evil, but they're bureaucrats.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the movie themselves said, the quote better than me, said that they won't even save their own mother unless they file a report, copy it, lose it again, find it, tear it to shreds, refile it, and then send it to like 20 different agencies or whatever the quote was. Yeah.
Well, and the thing, Mr. No, about the movie version is he added in this whole extra plot line that people think it was Carrie Kilpatrick, and they were kind of blaming him for that. And it was like, no, that was Douglas. Where the whole Hummacavula, he holds Zaphod's second head hostage to convince them to go to Magritte and all that.
Mm.
Hummacavula. That's his name. I thought he was swearing.
Mm. I love the fact that not only did they get Alan Rickman from Harry Potter, they also got the guy that played Vernon Dursley in it too. He played the head Vogan.
Yeah.
I kind of like that one because, a lot of people love to portray the Vogons as business bureaucrats, but he portrayed it as a political bureaucrat, especially like when he's destroying Earth and he's seeing all the people running around scared, and he's like, what's going on? The plans were in the Alpha Centauri system for well over 50 years. So
that's in every version.
Oh.
That's in every version. Going all the way back to the radio series, that's in every version.
Well, we read the original book and they didn't say it in the book. They just said your planet is scheduled to be destroyed to make room for an intergalactic highway.
That was in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, this will
about not going to Alpha Centauri.
No,
for heaven's sake, mankind, it's only 4 of your light years away.
Yeah. You know what else I'd like to think that's pointed out, and I think that's part of the joke, is that they say that the dolphins were actually smart and they knew the Vogons were coming. But I want to ask you this. If they were so smart, how did they not realize humans were misreading their warnings and didn't come up with a better form of communication, or at the very least figure out a way to stop the Vogons?
Yeah.
I think that's part of the joke, though. The joke is that they're so smart that they automatically assume everyone knows what they're talking about. But sadly, it's something you see a lot today. Like when a really smart person will go into all these details and all that, and you're just looking at them like, what? And you're like, you don't know what that is? No. And they're like, oh, you're a Philistine. It's like, no, that's just an area of expertise I'm not familiar with. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Kind of like you and that one guy that came on the podcast, and like the entire podcast was you and him talking about quantum physics and gravity. Yeah.
It's not evil, Mr. No, it's just amoral. They'll blow up a planet or not blow up a planet. It's all the same to them.
Yeah. Well, the Vogons, they would blow up their own planet if someone higher up told them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of their whole thing, You
Yep.
know,
They wouldn't even lift a finger to save their own grandmothers from the ravenous bug bladder beast of Trawl. Without orders signed in triplicate, sent in, sent back, queried, lost, found, subjected to public inquiry, lost again, and finally buried in soft pea for 3 months and recycled as firelighters.
Yep. Yeah, that's just how they are, No, they even kind of did that in the movie, where like, they're running away from the Vogons, main office, and they have them right in their sight and they can easily get them. And the lead Vogons get setting up a battle plan to capture them, but out of nowhere a bell rings and they're like, oh, it's lunchtime. Yep. And also in that same movie,
I do like the point of view gun. That one was good.
Yeah. Also, if I recall correctly, in that movie, wasn't there also a scene where a Vogan gets shot and killed, and the guy looks at him and says, "Why are you dying? You don't have permission to die yet." Yeah, the point of view gun, that was perfect. Yeah, especially how they defeated all those Vogons. Yeah.
Marvin fires the point of view gun.
Yeah. Oh, I feel so depressed. I can't face another day. Oh, what's the point? Yeah, Snape should have done that to defeat Voldemort. Yeah, cast a point of view spell. Yeah, suddenly all the Death Eaters are like, what's the point? I'm an inbred freak. Oh, what's the point? Yeah, that's so ironic about the Death Eaters. They're like how we're superior, we have pure blood, and I'm just thinking, all of you guys are a bunch of inbred freaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Voldemort wasn't, because he was actually he was a half-blood.
Yeah. And I even like how there's a lot of people that have pointed out, they're like, Tom Riddle Sr. was an evil man for abandoning his wife, and it's like, guys, but Tom Riddle's mom raped Riddle Sr. She raped him. Yeah. She gave him a drug that took away his free will and then seduced him into marrying her and conceiving a child with him against his will. So it makes perfect sense when he finally comes out of it, learns she's pregnant with a child he didn't consent to, that he would be like, bitch, you stay the hell away from me.
Yeah, what is a love potion other than the ultimate date rape drug?
Yeah. That's just so ironic. It's like in the wizarding world, love potions are treated like this funny little prank you pull on people. If a muggle were to do that, you'd be instantly arrested. Look at Bill Cosby.
Mm.
Yeah. Of course, the SJWs are turning on J.K. Rowling because she's putting her feminist views before her views on gay people, and she's pointing out that, listen, people that have vaginas and uteruses and menstruate, those are called women.
Yep.
Yeah. And like, oh, that's mean to the male to female transsexuals. Look, male to female transsexuals are women in name only. Remember John Cleese? You don't have a womb. What are you gonna do with the fetus? Put it in a box? Yeah. Or how about we acknowledge that he can't have children, but we acknowledge that he has the right to want to have children. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
Yeah. What was that from? Life of Brian?
Life of Brian, yeah. That was their masterpiece, if you ask me.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it's Holy Grail. I say it's Life of Brian.
Yeah.
Sure as fuck wasn't Jabberwocky.
Yeah. It's pretty funny because, people also remember John Cleese for Faulty Towers, but I don't think that was Monty Python, though. That was just a sitcom he was in.
No, but it was, oh God, it's like one of the funniest TV shows ever.
I actually haven't seen it, but I did see one scene, I guess, where they're dealing with a particularly difficult customer, and John Cleese, says, "Okay, we've taken care of all your complaints. Would you like us to move the hotel a little bit to the left?"
Yeah. Yeah, Basil Fawlty is a really terrible person and not the kind of person you'd want managing your hotel or anything else. But at the same time, if you've ever worked in any kind of retail environment or dealing with customers, he's what you wish you could get away with doing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a... Yeah, I've seen a few scenes from Life of Brian, but I really got to see the whole movie.
No, it's great.
Yeah, actually, there was a recent video on Forgotten Weapons. You've heard of Forgotten Weapons, right?
No.
Oh, there's a guy called Ian Collum, and he reviews obscure weapons. And because he has a long beard and mustache, people jokingly call him Gun Jesus. And someone made a sarcastic comment saying the Gun Jesus betrayed, he praised. And one person jokingly said, "He is not the Gun Jesus. He is a very naughty boy." I laughed at that comment, and I replied like in big letters saying "Gun enthusiast, who are you?" "I'm his mother. Praise be the Holy Mother."
It was the Judean People's Front crack Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Suicide Squad, attack!
Yeah, like, why was Brian worshipped again? Like, was it mentioned that he was born in the room next to Jesus? So everyone
Well, he
thinks
was
that
born
he's
in the
just
stable next to Christ, but that had nothing to do with why people started thinking he was a Messiah.
Yeah. Yeah, like, if I recall correctly, he's just an ordinary man, and the only reason why he seems to perform miracles is because he has common sense, but people misinterpret that and think,
well,
oh my God,
he's trying to hide from the Romans because he's part of a resistance group. And so he tries to hide from them by pretending to be a street preacher. And everything he's just spouting out is complete BS. And then he just stops when they're gone and goes on and like, well, what were you saying? What were you saying? And everyone, of course, is putting their own interpretation into this. And thinking he must be this Messiah because of all these confusing things he was saying.
Yeah. Kind of like South Park, in The Tale of Scrody McBoogerballs, where people kept insisting there's a hidden message in The Tale of Scrody McBoogerballs, and
Yeah.
and the guys are like, "No, we wrote it because we wanted to create a gross, funny story." No, nobody would write about Scrody McBoogerballs pus filled, they get sick, just to make fun of it. That is a hard episode to watch, though, because everyone gets sick. They're like, and Scrody stuffed his pus-filled. Ew! No more! No, please, no! Yeah, and then Scrody picked his nose and shoved it up his rectum, and they lived happily ever after. Oh my God, that was the best thing I ever read. Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a parody of academia where you have someone who just wrote a book. It might not even be a very good book, but people are trying to find all these profound messages in it.
Yeah, well, it was mostly making fun of Catcher in the Rye, because I've heard a lot of people say, like, I've never read the book, but a lot of people have told me it's not worth it. It's not worth the hype it's cracked up to be.
But I mean, they were doing that with The Wizard of Oz while L. Frank Baum was still alive, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he's making this commentary about the plight of farmers, and the slippers represent this, and the Cowardly Lion represents that, and everything represents." And he was like, "I wrote a children's book."
Yeah, same thing with Alice in Wonderland. People are like, they think that it means something, this and that, but the author himself said over and over again, it's a book about a girl having a dream.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're debating, you know, the whole point of Alice in Wonderland and like, was it a dream? Was it not? You're missing the point because it clearly says at the end, Alice wasn't transported to a magical fairy tale land. She literally was having a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny about that, you know. To be fair, we kind of see that too today, you know, with a lot of nursery rhymes. Like, you know, a lot of people, like, you can't look over a nursery rhyme where people are saying, did you know that this nursery rhyme was actually about people being violently executed and dying? And then, but then you actually take a look from a linguist and they look it up and it's like, no, the earliest we can find is a scripture, but with slightly different lyrics from the 18th century, and it's from a children's book.
That was something Monty Python did in the Holy Grail. They stop and they show a guy and the caption says, a famous historian. And they're talking about, yes, and this was the point where King Arthur and his knights went there, and it was just trying to make all of these big issues about it. And one of the knights rides by on a horse and cuts his head off.
Yeah, and doesn't that end up with the knights becoming fugitives and they're all going to, and they're all being, yeah. There's actually a funny fan theory out there that the story of Monty Python Quest for the Holy Grail is that it doesn't actually take place in 11th century England. Rather, it takes place in real life, and this is just a LARPing session that got out of control.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the theory that all of them are just LARPers and they got a little too into character, which is why they ended up killing someone.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing Monty Python would make fun of you for saying.
Yeah, I know. Well, who knows? I mean, you know, the whole point of a lot of Monty Python sketches is that it doesn't make sense, but they do it in such a way that
it's not supposed to make sense. And it's like, if you come up with anything that's, you know, creative or surreal or anything like that, then people either assume you are on drugs, which doesn't work because you can't do anything like that on drugs, or that you had some kind of deep hidden message or something like that.
Yeah, drugs. It's like so many great stuff has been about drugs. Yeah, I think I saw, it wasn't Monty Python, but it was a similar, like, British-esque comedy where it's like, oh yeah, I once had the greatest adventure when I was on drugs. Oh really? What happened? I don't remember. Yeah.
Well, they actually did this on South Park, and from what I understand, people who tried it was actually like this. And the kid was like, yes, we'll you know, get high on these drugs, and then we'll, you know, ride out all this great music and all this other stuff like that. And they when they come down from it, they look at what they've done, and it's just a bunch of crap and meaningless scribbles and things like that.
I think that wasn't they were a band, rather they were a newscast crew. And they can't come up with any ideas, so they decide to get high off of cough syrup, and they end up liking a show that's beating them in the ratings, and they're like, I don't get it, we hated this show. But then they get high and they're like, oh, we like it. And then they find a story that it turns out everyone's getting high off of cough syrup, and that's the reason the show's so popular. Yeah,
but I mean, the point is, they were like, you know, like the psychedelic bands, they were like, oh, they just got high and started playing, and like people tried that, and you know, while they were doing it, they were thinking, oh, we're making all this great stuff. And then, you know, the next day or whatever, when they come down from it, they listen to it, it's just all a bunch of garbage.
Yeah.
Just meaningless garbage.
Yeah. Well, I know Family Guy did a joke like that where Peter and Lois try to start a couple duo, and they use pot as inspiration, and they think they're making these beautiful songs, but in real life, all they're doing on stage is walking around moaning and doing crazy stuff to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm all for marijuana legalization, but I hate those people that are like, oh, marijuana is great and it does all this inspiration, it has no bad side effects. It's like, listen, it's a drug that alters your mind. It's got to have some kind of negative side effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever heard the old saying, it's probably too good to be true? Yeah, wasn't Bingus Dingus in Life of Brian?
Biggest Dickus, yeah. I have a very great friend in Rome called Bigusticus.
Yeah.
Hail, Caesar!
Yeah, by the way of the Romans, one interesting story I read that one person said that proves that the Bible couldn't have occurred the way it did was, see, the common story that we hear all the time was that Pontius Pilate didn't want to kill Jesus, but the crowd was threatening to riot, and so he did it to appease the people. But people said, listen, Pontius Pilate was real, but the real Pontius Pilate would not have put up with that. If he did encounter Jesus and said, you know what, I don't think he's worthy of executing, I'm just going to flog him, and the crowds were saying, oh, well, if you don't flog him, we're going to riot. Back then, that was a good way to have the Praetorian Guards show up and burn down your village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. 8 o'clock. Time to be wrapping this up. Any final thoughts?
Nope, other than the Green Bay court system sucks.
Yeah, there are very minimal side effects of marijuana, but it's still a drug. Still got to be careful with it, and who knows what, interactions there might be or whatever, because the government won't let them study it. Yeah. What's wrong with studying? What's wrong with figuring it out? But anyway. Yeah, so hopefully things will be working next month and we can do more of a proper live stream, and I hope you all enjoyed this one. Thank you so much, and I should be able to get back into making, but I got a bunch of stuff to catch up on, I know. So we'll see you. Until then, stay strong.